The theme set for today is Call to be Compassionate. Call to be Compassionate. And today I will be focusing all the three readings that we have heard from Old Testament, Epistle, and from the Gospel. We think that we live in a world that is more connected than ever before. But at the same time, we are more divided than ever before. With a single touch on our phone, we see sufferings from across the world. We see the images of war, people fleeing for their life, children growing in poverty, families breaking apart, and individuals struggling with mental illness, individuals struggling with loneliness, suffering with the difficult situations, especially the women. Information reaches us quickly, but compassion does not always follow. Social media gives us a platform to share their thoughts and ideas, but it does not guarantee that anyone is truly heard. Many people are surrounded by the noise, but deep inside, they still feel alone. They still feel rejected. They still feel loneliness. In such a world, compassion often gives way to judgment. Instead of asking, how can I help? We ask, who is responsible? Instead of drawing near, we scroll faster. And instead of listening, we argue. Compassion feels very risky today. It costs time, it costs our energy, even sometimes it costs our reputation, because standing with the broken can bring criticism. But the Bible is very clear about this. God never answers to a broken world by staying away. God never answers to a broken world by keeping silent. God's answer has always been compassion expressed through his people. And when we look at in Mark chapter 1, verses 40 to 45, here we see a powerful example of Jesus' compassion. When Jesus meets the human broken, he did not stay away. He did not go far away. We see that Jesus, he comes close to us. A man, in this reading we have found that a man who was avoided by the society, he came close to Jesus and asked politely to Jesus that if you are willing, you can make me clean. So people are still asking the same question today. It is asked in the hospital, it is asked in the refugee camps, it is asked in the prison, school, workplaces, and even it is asked in the church today. People are asking, does God really care about me? Am I important to him? Am I worth being helped or saved? We see that Jesus answered to this man not only verbally, but in action. Jesus reached out to the man and touched him. This same kind of compassion is also we can see in Ruth chapter 2, where God takes care of the two poor women with the act of kindness. And also it is taught in Ephesians chapter 4, where believers are told to be kind, forgiving, and loving towards others. So here we see that all these three passages reminds us and reminds the church today that we are called to show God's compassion in real, visible ways in this world, the way Jesus has done to that man. So firstly, let us look at the compassion of Christ that restores the broken today. The compassion of Christ that restores the broken today. We see in Mark chapter 1 verse 40 that the story begins with a man who is suffering with leprosy. In Bible's time, leprosy was the sickness of the body. It does not only affect a person, only the body, but they affect the whole life. And in those days, having leprosy was like receiving life sentence. And people believed that leper was unclean. People believed that leper was unclean. They were sinner, and they were afraid to go near to him. They were afraid that he was dangerous. No one was allowed to touch him. And because of this situation, that man was forced to live far away from others. He could not stay with his family. And even he was not allowed to worship like us today, the way we are coming here to worship together. He was separated from the community. And this helps us to know that the man, that he was living at the edges of the society. He was lonely, he was rejected, and he was forgotten. And now we can understand that the pain that the man was undergoing was not only the physical pain, but also it was his emotional and spiritual. So this is the same man that we can see in Mark chapter 1 verse 40, who came to Jesus asking and hoping for healing and restoration. When we look at in today's world, the sickness may not be leprosy, but the experience is very similar. There are still people who are rejected. There are still people who are pushed away in the society. These are the lepers today, in today's world. They are often people who pull away, who are given labels and judged before they are truly known. They may be people struggling with addictions. There may be people suffering with HIV and AIDS. There may be people, those who are living in refugee camps, prisons, or people, those who have lost their hope, failed many times in their life. And because of these struggles, others may keep step away from them. And sometimes these people may not be outside the church. They are sitting quietly inside it. They may smile. They may greet gently with one another. They try to look fine outside. But inside, they are carrying deep shame, pain, agony, and loneliness. Like the leper in Mark chapter 1, they are longing to be accepted. They are longing to be heard, and they are longing to be touched by compassion. In Mark chapter 1 verse 40, the man with leprosy dares to come to Jesus, and this was very risky for him. Here we see that he breaks the social rules, he breaks the social norms, status, and again he puts himself in danger of being rejected by the people. He kneels before Jesus and asks him quietly, "If we are willing, you can make me clean." His words show here something very important. He does not doubt that Jesus has the power to heal him. He believes that Jesus can do it. But what is unsure is that whether Jesus wants to help him or not. He wonders if he is worth Jesus' time, care, and compassion. Many a times in today's world, we feel the same way. We believe and we think that God can help others, but deep down in our heart, we wonder if God really cares about ourselves personally. They question their own worth and ask, "Am I too broken? Am I too unclean? Will God really help me? The Bible says, again, when we read the verse 41, that Jesus moves with compassion. Jesus moves with compassion. This means more than feeling a little sorry for someone. It is a deep feeling that comes from Jesus' heart. Jesus does not keep himself distance, or Jesus does not stay safe. What Jesus does, he steps closer. When Jesus sees the man with leprosy, he reaches out and touched him. This is very important. In Jewish customs and Jewish law, when someone touched the lepers, it made them unclean. And maybe this was the reason that made the people to avoid that person. But when Jesus touched that man, here we see the opposite things happen. Jesus did not make unclean by touching that leper. But what we see here that instead, by the touching of Jesus, that unclean man become clean. Here we can find that Jesus' holiness is greater than any other sickness. His compassion brings healing. This is the gospel in action. Sin does not make Jesus unclean. Our brokenness does not weaken Jesus' holiness. When Jesus steps into human pain, the human pain does not spread to Jesus. Rather, what happened? The healing flows from Jesus to us. And this is very important. When Christ touches wounded life, wholeness begins. Shame, it starts to lose its grip. What was damaged, it restores again. His presence does not condemn what broken, but it renews it. Still today, this is very true. When Jesus enters a human broken heart, when Jesus enters into a human pain, there begins the change. Not because that the pain of the human is very small, but the power that Jesus had is greater. Here we see that the healing is immediate, but the restoration is greater than physical health. The man is returned to the community. The man is returned to the worship and dignity. Compassion does not simply remove pain. It restores belonging. It brings back where they are belong. It gives them their place again. In a world where many people today are isolated, where many people are today rejected, so this truth matters deeply. Jesus does not heal the wounds. Jesus does not only heal the wounds, but we see that he restores lives. We can find this in Luke chapter 5, verses 13 to 14. In verse 44, here again we see that after healing the man, Jesus told to the man that go to the priest and follow the law. Go to the priest and follow the law. This reminds us that compassion and truth are not enemies. Compassion and truth are not enemies. True compassion does not ignore responsibility or wisdom. It works within God's purposes to bring full restoration. So today, this teaches us that to combine grace with accountability. This teaches us that to combine love with truth, to combine care with wisdom. So the question for the church is very clear today. Who are we avoiding? Who do we keep in the safe place? Compassion calls us to draw near to them. Compassion calls us to touch the lives of the people, those who are in need, not only with the verbally, but also in action, the way Jesus had shown to us. Secondly, let us look at God's compassion working through faithful lives. God's compassion working through faithful lives. The compassion did not begin in the New Testament. We see from the beginning, God cares the people who are weak and hurting. And again, when we look at in Ruth chapter 2, here we see that God works through faithful people to protect and provide the vulnerable. We know that Ruth was in difficult situations. She was a widow, she was poor, and also she was a foreigner. She had no husband, no land, and no security. The same situations also we can see in her mother-in-law. She had no husband, no sons to take care of her. She was feeling deep pain and bitterness. We see this in Ruth chapter 1, verses 20 to 21. Their lives were full, broken, and uncertain. So when Ruth goes to the field to gather the leftover grain so that they can eat, here we see that God leads Ruth to the field of Boaz. We see this in Ruth chapter 2, verse 3. Boaz notices Ruth and treats her with kindness. He tells her that she can stay in her field, she will be safe. And he makes sure that she has enough grain to collect so that she can have enough food when she returned to her home. Boaz explained that she is helping her because she knows her story, and that is why he honors her faithfulness. This story reflects many realities today in our society. Around the world, when we look at, people are forced to leave their home due to war, due to poverty and loss. Many women and elderly people have no security. They are finding it difficult to survive because there is no protection for them. They do not have family and support. Like Ruth and Naomi, they often depend on the kindness of others. So Ruth chapter 2 reminds us that God sees those who are suffering. God can see those who are struggling. He cares deeply for the people, those who are in need. And often God chooses to work through ordinary people who shows compassion, generosity, and faithfulness. As we all know the story of Ruth, that she goes to the field to glean, picking up the leftover grains so that she and her mother-in-law, Naomi, can survive. So God's law allowed the poor and the widows to do this, showing that God cares deeply for those in need. We can also find this in Leviticus chapter 19, verses 9 to 10. And also in Ruth chapter 2, verse 2. Ruth is not asking something special treatment, but she is simply trusting God for her daily food. Ruth happens to come to the field of Boaz, as we find this in Ruth chapter 2, verse 3. But this is not just an accident. Actually, God leading her steps, even when she was not realizing it. What looks like chance is actually God works behind the scene. Boaz notices Ruth when she comes to his field. That is where compassion begins with noticing. In a busy world, seeing someone who is often overlooked can change everything. Boaz does not ignore her, or Boaz does not treat her like a burden. Boaz asks Ruth and listens to her story. He learns about her faithfulness towards her mother-in-law, Naomi, and her trust in God. And because of this reason, Boaz speaks kindly towards her, and he offers protection. He tells her to stay in his field where she will be safe. Here we can find that Boaz goes beyond what the law requires. He invites Ruth to eat at his table. You see this in Ruth chapter 2, verse 14. He gives her more than what she requires for the food. Even here we see that he instructs his workers to leave some grains so that she can collect for her need. And here we see that Ruth is treated with dignity, not with shame. So the story reminds us that true compassion is not only about meeting our needs. It is about seeing people. It is about listening to them. It is about honoring their worth. Later, Naomi, she came to know that what Boaz had done to her family. At that time, Naomi, she said, the Lord has not stopped showing his kindness. We see this in Ruth chapter 2, verse 20. Naomi understands that God is helping for them through someone, that is Boaz. So this is very important even for the church today. Many people first feel God's love not by hearing the messages, not by looking the church building, but through how Christians act and how Christians treat towards them. God often shows his compassion through the action of his people. So the story of Ruth teaches us that compassion often looks very simple. Compassion often looks very ordinary. It looks like treating people with a fair manner. It looks like welcoming the strangers. It looks like helping the people, those who are in need. It looks like protecting people, those who are weak or vulnerable or overlooked. Today, we can mean helping a co-worker, listening to someone who feels invisible, caring for the elderly, widow, or the single parent. This action may be small. This action may look like very small in our eyes, but they show God's love in real and powerful ways. So thirdly, let us look at living a compassionate life in a harsh world. Living a compassionate life in a harsh world. Ephesians chapter 4 teaches us to live with compassion every day. Paul writes to the believers who are dealing with conflicts just like people today. Paul says that we should get rid of our anger, we should get rid of our harsh words and bitterness. We see this in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 31. These things were very common then, but today also we see that these things are very common, especially in the public places and on social media. Instead, Paul tells Christians to be kind and compassionate and forgiving with one another, just as God forgave us in Christ. In verse 32, we find this. So this reminds us that following Jesus Christ means choosing kindness, choosing patience, and forgiveness, even though when it is difficult. Paul calls believers to live in a different way from the world around them. Following Jesus should change how we speak. Following Jesus should change how we act and how we think. Compassion affects our words. It means telling the truth, but doing it with kindness, not with cruelty. So our words should build others up, not just to tear them down. Compassion also affects how we handle our anger. Everyone feels angry at times, but Paul teaches us that do not let our anger control us or damage our relationships. Instead of holding to anger, we choose patience and self-control. So compassion also means forgiving others. Compassion also means forgiving others, even when it feels easier to take revenge. Forgiveness is not always easy, especially when we are very deeply hurt. It is very difficult. Living this way helps us to show Christ's love to a world where there is full of brokenness and unforgiving. Forgiveness is one of the hardest way to show the compassion in this world. Forgiveness is one of the hardest way to show the compassion in today's world. When we are hurt, it is often feel easier to take revenge. But Paul reminds believers that our forgiveness comes from the Christ that he has already shown us. He says, forgive one another just as in Christ God forgave you. So every act of compassion is connected to the cross. We need to focus here. Every act of compassion is connected to the cross. Jesus carried our sin. Jesus carried our shame. Jesus carried our rejection so that we could be forgiven. We find this in Isaiah chapter 53, verses 4 to 5. Because we have received grace so that we can give grace to others, even when it is difficult. When believers live in this way, the gospel becomes visible. When believers live in this way, the gospel becomes visible. People do not just hear about Jesus, rather, they will see in our actions. And the church becomes the place of healing for the broken people, and the church becomes the place for the hurting people to find the peace. So in today's world, this may look like choosing forgiveness in families, choosing forgiveness in our workplaces, choosing forgiveness in our church or on online spaces. It may mean responding kindness instead of anger, listening instead of attacking, and showing patience where others expect judgment. When Christians live with compassion and forgiveness, people often encounter with Christ, not first through preaching, but through lives that reflect his love. So the call to be compassionate is not optional. Call to be compassionate is not optional. It is central to the gospel. In Mark chapter 1, we see that Jesus touches the untouchable. And in Ruth chapter 2, we see that God works through faithful kindness. And when we look at in Ephesians chapter 4, here we see that believers are called to be transformed, to live a transformed lives. So the same question remains today. Is God willing? The answer is yes, God is willing. And through Christ, he now calls us to be the people so that to be willing to. So may we be the church that there no draws instead of stepping back. May we be the church that everyone who feels in need we may draw near to them instead of stepping back. May we speak instead of spreading harm. May the compassion that we have received from Christ overflow into this hurting world. May God bless us all.